Talking today about how would you set your weight loss goals and how I set my weight loss goals and some of the other standards that people use. And it can be important because you don't want to have goals that are unreasonable. You don't want to have goals that are not inspiring. You want this to set you up for success, right? All right, so how I set my weight loss goal. So if you happen to be a person who's really happy with your weight, really happy with your eating and your drinking, you might be thinking, I don't care. My weight is fine. Why would I even worry about it? I hate that people worry about it. Or what I used to think in my 20s and 30s when it just seemed pretty easy to maintain a slender weight or get back to a slender weight if I started gaining weight, I used to think, well, people just need to eat less. And it just turns out that is not what the research shows. And it isn't what a lot of our experience shows. At least for me, after my mid 40s, that didn't work anymore. What used to work wasn't working, and it wasn't working in a way that made me heavier and heavier and heavier with more and more symptoms of metabolic dysfunction. So when I finally discovered an eating approach that predictably and reliably produces weight loss and improved metabolic health in big ways and improved functioning, et cetera, then I needed to address this question of, well, what will be my goal? What am I aiming for, right? And it was a little anxiety producing. I remember thinking, okay, what was my best weight over 40? Which really doesn't have to be the way that we go about it. But I set that as my initial weight. And then as I just kept eating in this really healthy way, and it was really easy, there was no reason to stop at that over 40 weight. And then I was aiming for something more like my college weight, where I had felt much more comfortable. I needed to make some changes. If you're feeling like I really need to lose some weight, I need to figure out how that works, but I need to know how to set my goal. That's what I'm talking about today. How are you going to know when you're there? It matters because although I find it works best to follow the same fundamental principles for healthy eating and a slender weight, we do start eating more when we get to our goal weight. So that's why it matters a bit. We don't want to just accidentally start eating a little more of this and a little more of that. We still want to follow really clear, specific healthy eating principles. What I found is if you can write it out like in a manual, like this is exactly what I eat for breakfast, the quantities of proteins and fats and fruits and vegetables and whole grains. This is exactly what I eat for lunch. This is what I eat for dinner. There's a lot of room, but you do want to be pretty clear about your quantities. And that stays true in maintenance. You want to figure out what the quantities are that make it possible to maintain your slender weight. So you don't have this very common result of just starting to gain weight again, right? So how will I know when I'm there? What will be my goal weight? So what should your goal weight be? I work mostly with smart, successful women over 50 and 60. They tend to prioritize being healthy over weight loss or size. They really want to feel well. They really want to function well. They want to feel like they're feeding themselves in a really healthy way that just works. And I think that's right. I think excess weight gain is just one of the indicators that our metabolic functions aren't working the way we want them to work. Very interesting to study this stuff. It might be even one of the later indicators that our metabolic functions are disturbed. So I've seen doctors who study metabolism. Some are saying 80%, and some are saying closer to 90% of us have disturbed metabolic functions in these times. And that is exactly the same kind of numbers of people who are overweight or obese. A lot of times I hear people talk about this like we're going to get better health when we lose weight. And I don't think we're thinking about it quite right. We're going to get better health by eating in a healthy way, in a truly healthy, slenderful way. And that is going to produce weight loss and all these improvements in our metabolic health. So we care the most about feeling well, about functioning well, about being able to live our best life. But part of that does come down to, I do care how I look. This is just natural that we care how we look. One of my clients was telling me last week, one of the reasons I want to change this is I don't feel comfortable about dating. And I definitely felt like that. I kept saying, I'll date when I lose some weight. Well, I got to age 55 and was going, you know what? Maybe I need to date anyway, because like I'm not necessarily losing weight, but it does really matter for how we feel in our lives. I had one woman that I worked with 5 years ago, beautiful woman, amazing woman, someone I just admire so much. And she talked about how she was constantly thinking about hiding her body. That's a terrible feeling. And the idea that amazing, beautiful women are going through life worrying about hiding their bodies, I did too. It's something we just really want to escape, right? We don't want to live there. So after studying all this in recent years in quite a bit of depth, I've come to the conclusion that weight loss that lasts, that's sustainable, it's very, very unlikely outcome when we change our eating, when we diet. Getting weight loss that lasts only generally comes from truly healthful eating. So we're transforming the systems and the cells in our body so they work better for healthy functioning, for high energy, and that also turns off the fat switch. And if you want to hear more about this idea, follow me on YouTube. But for now, let's address this question. If you want to lose weight to look and feel better, and you want to do it in a healthy, natural way that produces sustainable results, which are a bit of a unicorn, how will you set the target weight? So what's a good target weight can be a tricky question. It's going to depend on the individual. It's going to depend maybe on your age, maybe on your race, maybe on what has been the most healthy weight that you've had over your lifetime. So BMI is one of the measures that's used in the science all the time. So they do find that having a higher BMI, body mass index, especially over 30, is associated with much greater health risks. Everybody knows it's putting extra stress on our bones. It's putting extra stress on our joints. It's putting extra stress on our organs. All these things are having to work harder than they should. It's worsening conditions like osteoarthritis, back pain, asthma, and sleep apnea, which is also a very common condition in these times. So I was having a lot of chronic pain and joint inflammation, and it finally became clear to me this has to do with how I'm eating. When I change how I'm eating to get healthy weight loss, it's possible all of that will start to change. I really had no idea how much that could improve. It was very dramatic. And I've seen that now with hundreds of people. We can be raising our blood pressure and our cholesterol the way we're eating in our society. So this makes heart disease and stroke more likely and relates to our BMI. I was having an increase in cholesterol in my blood, which might not be good, although there's a lot of complexity. I think more complexity is being understood all the time about cholesterol. Also, higher BMI is linked to several kinds of cancers, and it's also making your body respond less well to insulin. So we are getting insulin resistant. It looks like that's become a very common condition, and that can lead to type 2 diabetes. My blood sugar was elevated enough to qualify as prediabetes. So I knew it was going to be important to change my body mass index. We don't want to feel pressured into measuring up to repressive, unrealistic cultural beauty ideals. I don't know if you guys have studied this about the Barbie doll, but if we were trying to look like the Barbie doll, I remember loving my Barbie dolls and thinking, wow, I want to look like that. So here's what that would be in a real person. We would be 5'9" tall. We would weigh 110 pounds. Wow. We would have a 39-inch bust, an 18-inch waist, and a 33-inch hips, and we'd be wearing a size 3 shoes. This doesn't sound possible, right? Her tiny feet wouldn't even support her body. She would have to walk on all fours, and her BMI would be 16.24, which is anorexic. So we do not want to buy into these kind of beauty ideals. That's not what we want to be going towards with weight loss. I don't want to buy into those expectations. I don't want to buy into the idea that my life only matters to the extent that I'm pleasing to look at in this kind of ridiculous standard. But I did want to feel good about my body. I wanted to approach it with love and appreciation. And there is research showing that women with a positive body image are more likely to have good physical health and good mental health. So I know for me, it really helped to start giving myself positive messages about my body. I want to feed my body so that it's really healthy, it's really well, it's really happy. I want to treat it like I love it rather than it's like an enemy to me, right? I want to think about how to feed it so it feels the best and it functions the best possible. Can you see how that might affect how you eat and drink? So, how I determined my weight loss goals, I was 5'6" when I finally figured out how to eat. I weighed over 190 pounds and I felt very overweight and very embarrassed. For at least 10 years, I was hiding from cameras. When I looked for pictures for before and after, I didn't find very many because for 10 years, I didn't let people take pictures of me. So, all the pictures of being with family and being in beautiful places, etc., having fun didn't happen for me for 10 years. That kind of stuff matters in our life, right? So the BMI chart at the doctor's office, I would look at it and it would tell me my weight height ratio was over 30, and that qualified me as obese. I didn't think of myself as obese. I thought of that as somebody who's, 500 pounds in a wheelchair, can't walk at all. But actually, I could barely walk anymore because of pain and inflammation in my feet. So when I started toward my weight loss goal with the right eating approach, I thought, okay, over 40 weight. I remember really liking size 10, 150 pounds. So that was where I initially set my weight loss goal. I had felt a little overweight at that size, but I thought it was a reasonable size for my mid 50s when I started doing this. So it seemed like a stretch goal to me. It seemed like it was going to be hard, but that's because I had been using dieting and exercise, which are not sustainable solutions. Once I found this healthy eating approach way of losing weight and I wasn't hungry losing weight, there was no reason to stop at 150 pounds. I wasn't suffering with weight loss eating. So the BMI chart said 150 pounds would be borderline for healthy BMI. The Centers for Disease Control in the United States gives a big range for normal weight for that height, and that's 115 pounds to 154 pounds. So if we believe getting into the normal range sounds right for us, that gives us a lot of play. That gives us a lot of places to go. So for me, being 150 pounds, I was pretty close to being into overweight again. So I decided, okay, once I got to 150 and it was just easy to keep going, then I thought, okay, maybe I want to go farther into the normal range. So what weight do I want to be? I decided to aim for a weight further inside the healthy BMI range. Now, I want to point out when you start releasing excess weight, some people around you might get worried. Part of that is because we've become accustomed to people. So 80% of us now are overweight or obese. It doesn't look right to people seeing a normal weight sometimes. Also, if you're eating in the typical way that people eat in our society and you're losing weight without trying, that can mean you're sick. When we are intentionally losing weight because we're eating in a much healthier way than the typical standard Western diet, we aren't losing weight because we're sick. We're losing weight because we're getting healthy and our body doesn't feel it needs to store excess fat anymore. I did have one friend when I got to the next milestone who said, "You're too skinny now." When I asked all my other friends, they said, "No, you don't look skinny. You still have curves. You look good. You look healthy, etc." So be careful about letting other people tell you what your weight should be because our norms have shifted toward much more overweight and obese rather than a normal healthy weight. So how will you determine your weight loss goal? So there's a lot of different standards you could use. You could just say, I remember being this one weight in college, and that felt like a really good healthy weight. I could do everything I wanted to do, etc. So I want to go for that weight. Or you might look at your BMI range and look to at least get into the normal range or get 10 or 15 or 20 pounds into the normal range. There's other standards some people can use. People don't always love the BMI range. part of the play in there for what's normal can have to do with how muscular you are. So if you're someone who's been working out a lot and you have a lot of muscle, what's a healthy BMI for you might be higher. Some people also believe that when people are over 70 years old, it's a good idea to have a somewhat higher BMI because if we get pneumonia or something and can't eat for a while, we want to have a little extra fat stored for that purpose, right? So we might set it based on the BMI. We could set it based on insurance company statistics. The reason that could be a good idea is insurance companies want to know what's going to cause, they know what's going to cause higher blood pressure, higher heart disease, what's going to make them have to pay out, what's going to cause diabetes, et cetera. So the statistics they're using to judge whether they want to insure us or not could be a good set of guidelines to follow for setting your goal weight if you want to go to that level of trouble. One of the best standards we can use that is very highly predictive is our waist circumference. So for a non-pregnant woman, we should have a waist circumference of less than 35 inches in order to be healthy. So that can be a really great measure to use that's pretty easy. And you can go on Google if you're trying to figure out, but exactly where am I measuring this? And then healthy BMI range. So those are all some good possible standards that you could use. So what I'm encouraging you to do in this talk is pick a standard that makes sense to you and come up with a number, a range that makes sense to you, whether it's size or weight. Some people don't want to use any of those kinds of standards, and that's fine too. Maybe your standard will be when I feel more energy, when such and such pants fit comfortably. It could be various standards that you're going towards, but if you're trying to go towards a size or a weight, these are some guidelines. The highest average BMI is in North America. We have the highest BMI averages. In 2005, almost 20 years ago, the average BMI in the United States was 28.5, which is overweight. I'm sure that's quite a bit bigger now because the rate of obesity has gone up a lot in those last 20 years. So 28.5 average in the United States in 2005, and the average in Japan the same year was 22.9, right? So very different BMI ranges. The best research so far indicates that the healthiest is to find a weight about halfway into the normal weight range. So between a BMI of 19 to 24. Ultimately, I will tell you, most of my clients discover they can get to a lower weight than they thought. And that's because they've been using bad approaches. They've had bad experiences. They just got hungry. It just got really, really hard. And that isn't how doing it this way works. So there's no problem with continuing to lose weight. You're just eating healthy. Other possible standards. The French standard is one, and that one tends to be a bit smaller than using sort of the middle of the BMI range. The French standard is you should weigh 100 pounds for 5 feet in height, and then 5 pounds per inch after that. So at 5'6", the goal for me would be 130 pounds, right? I feel like that wouldn't be a bad standard for me. I didn't go for that standard. I don't think I'd be too thin. I think that could be a good standard for me. That's not what I used. An even more strict standard, a skinnier goal, is Dr. Joel Fuhrman's standard. He believes being a lot lower weight is leading to reduced cardiovascular risk. So he recommends 95 pounds for 5 feet in height and 4 pounds per inch after that. I was looking to see if I had done the math on that. 95 plus 24. For me, that feels like it'd be skinny for me. So of the numbers of people that I've worked with, I've had a couple of clients who felt like, yeah, I've always been really skinny. I really like being skinny. I really want to get to skinny again. And they wanted to use a standard more like that. So I think you can also just go with what is a healthy size that feels right to me. There are pros and cons to having more fat. I really was a little bit shocked at how much I lost fat in the chest area. Like I was hoping to keep most of that and lose fat in other places, and it doesn't exactly work like that, right? So there are pros and cons to having more fat on the body. Women certainly have more fat on the body and are supposed to have more fat on the body than men do. So figure out what seems right to you with all these ideas. There are other things we can measure that can be just as important, and I recommend measuring them. Like start out when you find this healthy eating approach, you start implementing it. You want to be tracking your weight. Some people do that every week. Some people do that every month. Some people do that every day. You have to be careful about not being freaked out by the ups and downs if you look at it every day. Some people never want to check their weight because they get too freaked out by it, and that's okay too. So in addition, you might want to be grading your energy on a 1 to 10 scale. A lot of people start changing their eating, their energy levels are really kind of problematic, and those start to get a lot better. And that starts to get very validating. You might be measuring function, like, oh, one of my clients was just saying how she has always been very athletic. She does CrossFit. What she noticed recently is she could do pull-ups again, and she hadn't been able to do that for a long time. So you might be looking at certain functions. Oh, I can walk a lot longer than I could walk, or I can get up and down off the floor. I always think of Michaelina. One of the things was gardening was getting difficult, and getting up and down to play with her grandson was getting difficult, and all those kinds of functions improved. So it's a really good idea to be measuring this because we're going to be pulled back to old ways of eating. I think of it like a rubber band. Come back, right? We're going to be pulled into ways of eating that do not serve us. So our weight may not be the only measure that's important to be tracking to keep us eating in this really healthy way. You might be tracking symptoms. For me, my insomnia and sleep issues, those were a symptom. Hot flashes were a symptom. Pain, how much pain was I dealing with? And you might be measuring based on certain tests. I always think about this one client whose husband was able to go off statins. So he was eating beside her, not exactly trying to follow the whole plan, but changing his eating enough that when he went to the doctor, those tests indicated he didn't need to be on statins anymore. So a lot of times we're looking at various kinds of tests. For me, I was looking at the blood sugar tests. I wanted those tests to reveal normal levels again, and they did. And a lot of us find that. So it can be important to have short-term goals and see the progress. I always think about a group that I was working with on quitting drinking. And we would talk every month. And I remember one time that they were saying, well, my sleep is better, but it's not great yet. And so I asked them, okay, let's rate it. 6 months ago, when you started this program, how would you rate your sleep quality on a scale of 1 to 10? That was a lot of twos, like it was bad. And then how would you rate it now? Well, like a 6. Okay. That is progress. Seems like we're doing the right things. We're on the right track, and we want to continue on this track. Can you see how having other measures can be helpful? What about advice from family, friends, and strangers? So I talked about this a little bit earlier, and I have a picture of my first German Shepherd, Xena, warrior princess, who I used to compete in agility competitions. And the reason I'm showing a picture of her is people would often tell me, your dog is so skinny. She's way too skinny. You got to feed her more. Now, she was very athletic. You didn't see very many German Shepherds competing in agility, and she looked beautiful doing it. I was very, very proud of her, and she was very happy because she was staying very active and using her brains and her body to do this sport. She was lean, and dogs, when they're healthy, veterinarians will tell you this, they should have a waist. You should be able to see a waist. But people are so used to seeing fat dogs now that a healthy size athletic dog looks really skinny to a lot of people. So you want to be careful about following the advice of other people who are going to worry. This doesn't seem right. I'm used to seeing people fat, used to seeing dogs fat. Now that you're this healthy size, it's a little worrisome to me. So if somebody feels like you're getting really freaky about eating, you might want to listen to that and look at that. But if somebody feels like I'm a little concerned that I'm seeing your weight go down, but while you're trying to lose weight, you might want to reassure them and maybe stay in touch with your doctor about it. So if your friends, family, and strangers are concerned, it may be because the norm has shifted to everyone's overweight or obese. And we are trying to step out of that norm and get to a healthier weight again. So how will you decide on a goal? You might use the normal BMI. I got a picture, before and after picture of Jessica here, and it's because I was just recently sharing her story. And because she just transitioned, she just decided, okay, I'm at my weight loss goal. It's time to start adding food. So I'm excited for her results and for her next steps. So you might pick BMI range and look for a number, a range in the BMI normal range that you want to target. You might look at your weight, you might look at your size, your waist circumference. You might think about the healthiest weight you've had in adulthood. That ended up being part of what guided me. If you're 65, 75, etc., you might want to have a bit higher BMI range. That might be the safest, the best idea for you. Not very high, definitely not obese, but maybe on the higher end of normal. Maybe you'll decide on a goal based on the weight or the size at which you have the best energy and mobility. So I hope that's helpful. I would love to hear any feedback that you have about what works for you as far as setting this goal. What ideas came through here that are helpful for you? It's a little complex, right? But it doesn't have to be scary. So hopefully I just gave you a whole lot of choices and you can just pick something and kind of aim for that target and see how it feels as you go. Are you feeling better and better? Are you starting to feel hungry, too thin, uncomfortable, lightheaded, right? Any of these kinds of things. I used to get lightheaded all the time when I ate in an unhealthy way. And when I dieted, I would get more lightheaded. That's not what's happening with healthy eating. It's just so good. It's just not hard like dieting is. All right, let me know what your experience is with this. I hope this was helpful. Take care.